The Irish Famine is the subject of a new comedy that's being developed by Channel 4. Owen Sweeney took to the streets this morning to gauge the public reaction to the idea.
What do I think of it? No problem whatsoever. You can have a good laugh at it.
And do you think some things just shouldn't be joked about?
I think it's a very sensitive period in Irish history. It's not that long ago. It's too raw. I don't know that you could find humour in it, and I would think it would be a bit insensitive, and definitely it's part of our history that we should respect. Certain things are off limits, and that would be one of them.
It'd be a good show, it'd be interesting, everything's up for grabs.
Like the Holocaust wouldn't be joked about,
Older generations, I think, might take more offence.
The famine was of such great magnitude that I think it's basically taboo.
I can't see how it could be a sitcom. It wasn't a pleasant time for anybody.
I don't know, I think this is the limit of what you can do with sitcoms, and I think that's something you shouldn't be doing.
You can find humour in anything, but no, it is wrong as well, because it's the English making it. That's the only reason we find it wrong. The French made it, we wouldn't care.
Yeah, why would the English be wanking us to exploit us? That'd be like if we made one on something like Diana or something like that, if we made a joke about that, or something like that.
I think it'd be gas. Irish people are, it's a big thing that happened, that you can laugh about it now, I guess.
Comedy should really be open to any sort of subject.
I suppose when you think of what happened in Paris the other day when those attacks on Charlie happened, I don't think it would happen as a result of this, but I suppose people have to be sensitive about what people say, but I would hope nobody would react the same here.
Great mix of views there. Owen Sweeney canvassing some views on the comedy series about the Irish Famine, which has been commissioned by Channel 4. You can text us on 51551 with your views. I'm joined in studio by historian Tim Pat Coogan. Tim Pat, what was your reaction when you first heard about this idea?
I was fairly disgusted. I spent a couple of years, as you probably know, researching a book on the famine. I've been sort of alone with the horror of it. You don't take lightly to making jokes about it, particularly as the kind of humour we've had was part of the excoriation process. Again, it was Irish people involved in doing it. The Punch cartoons and the depiction of the Irish as apes, that was the funny, quote funny, unquote funny component of it. I remember episodes. I mean, just to put the thing in context, the scale of it where Ireland is concerned, we could have hit 9 million. We were much more of a population than people thought at the time. Census thing and so on was bad. And that was cut down to at least 6. And the general consensus that it was 1 million dead and 1 million emigrated is wrong. It was only 2 million dead. And if you take that kind of blow to the population of a country, it shows, emigration continued thereafter. And the individual then, apart from the awfulness of people dying with yellow in their mouths and their bowels protruding from their persons to famine fevers and so on, just take one episode that abided with me. The Lillis family, they discovered when they got to Limerick docks that one of the children had typhus and they couldn't take him aboard. So the mother, father and the other 4 children had to make the agonising decision to leave the child to die on the docks while they embarked. And by the time they got to the New World, for the new beginning, everybody except the mother was dead of typhus.
OK, that's the reality of the famine, and nobody disputes that for 1 minute. But this isn't a great week, I would think, to advocate the curtailment of satire.
I was going to come to that.
Let me finish the question before you answer it. It's not a great week to be advocating the curtailment of satire, comedy or free speech. Are you not rushing to judgment? Should we not wait to see the finished product?
Did I advocate the curtailment of free speech? You didn't listen to me. I did not. I said I found it disgusting. I was explaining to you why. And I was about to say, but what happened this week underlines the principle, the Voltairean principle that I deplore what you're saying, but I will defend to the death the right to say it.
Okay.
Now, I'm not going to go near that show, next or near, but I would not certainly offer violence to it or placard it or anything. I just feel that whenever in days gone by, a stage Irishman was needed in the West End, they could always get an Irishman to play it. And they've done it in this case. And overarching the whole project is the position of Channel 4, which was an excellent part of the broadcasting network of our time, part of the broadcasting architecture. And it was set up from the days when the mogul, Roy Thompson, said that television was a license to print money. He was the precursor of Murdoch. And as a result of that, as the conscience of ITV, Channel 4 was set up. But over the years, and you've had these wonderful, like the John Snow reportage, the news programme, the Channel 4 News.
Well, they've also had Father Ted. A lot of people didn't approve of that at the time in this country.
Though, in another part of the forest, they had these dumbing down, the reality TV shows. They were also the show of Big Brother. And I'm afraid that just as a journalist, what's happened is Big Brother House, Big Brother Louse, if you like, have taken over from the Jon Snow element. So I deplore that also.
Okay, I want to just get the other side of the coin here, as it were, because the comedy is apparently going to be called Hungry and is to be written by Dubliner Hugh Travers. The script is still in development, so like many projects like that, it may never actually happen. But the mere suggestion of a famine sitcom provoked a considerable reaction online, with many commentators condemning the concept. The proposed project, though, has its defenders. Among them were the Limerick comedy hip-hop duo The Rubber Bandits, and Blind Boy of the Rubber Bandits joins us on the line now. Were you surprised by the reaction to this idea that 40,000 people, I think it was, maybe even more than that now, have gone online and petitioned against it?
I was, Myles. The first thing I want to say to Tim, my dad used to absolutely love your books when I was growing up in the house, so you were very much a legend in my house growing up, so it's a pleasure to be talking to somebody who's a legend, as always, just to let you know that.
And at least I'm alive, which the famine victims weren't. Yeah.
But why do you think that it has caused so much outrage? Is it because of the kind of stories, like the story of the Lillis family that Tim Pat has just outlined for us, and people cannot see the possibility of humour inherent in anything like that?
I think, first of all, my view towards the whole thing is that the first situation, that the first problem we have here is that people are being outraged by something that doesn't actually exist yet. That's very important to point out. We're talking about a hypothetical comedy that hasn't been written by a creative person yet, okay? That's number one. And number two, my own personal belief is that no subject is off limits to comedy. It's the context and the intent of how it's handled that matters. And I think these 40,000 people that have signed up against it, what that's actually shown to me is just it's kind of a lack of understanding of art in those people, to be honest, because I was listening to Tim there talking about the Lillis family and all those horrible stories. You could absolutely use satirical comedy very effectively to tell the story of the underdog and to actually create quite an emotive, meaningful piece of work that tells the story of the underdog and actually deconstructs the unfair policies against the Irish people. This comedy could potentially, in the right hands, be very, it could strike a chord emotionally with people, and it could tell some very real history that isn't getting told.
Tim Pat, I'm thinking of Blackadder Series 4, a comedy set in the trenches of World War I, another Holocaust, which satirised British arrogance and incompetence and negligence. Might the Channel 4 series not do exactly the same thing? It's unlikely to make fun of people dying of starvation and disease.
Well, I don't know what it's going to do. I said, actually, I was sitting at home watching television when the Irish Times phoned me. That's the original reason I'm here, because I made a comment. And I said, well, I don't know, we could all be pleasantly surprised. Yes, but it strikes me as a distasteful topic. And I take the point about the 30,000, 40,000 people. I think we're talking about the same protest. I think it's the one that Neil O'Dowd drew up in Irish Centre in New York.
Yeah.
Well, the interesting thing about that is, you see, why it got so many people for it is so many of them would be part of the descendants of the emigration, of the diasporas. So there's a race memory there, in a way that curiously we don't have in Ireland. Even though we have the famine graves, the mass graves and so on, it was kind of elided out of history here, airbrushed. They didn't want to give offence, and there is with the British neighbour, they didn't. There is a kind of a colonial cringe, a West British attitude here. It was part of it. Historians, the academic historians, a matter of record, you just try and see what they wrote, and you'll find it very easy because they wrote nothing, and they certainly wouldn't dare to ascribe blame or who was responsible for the genocide. So all that kind of bottled up feeling. I mean, even today, you'd find it very difficult to get discussed rationally in the north, because the Protestant element, by and large, would still share the view, certainly the DUP politicians would, that this was Irish fecklessness, Catholic fecklessness, and the famine didn't really affect the north, it didn't affect them. And I was once on the government's famine committee, and I tried then to get a famine commemoration held north of the border. But I was very politely slapped down because I didn't think it was right, the time isn't right, etc., etc. It's still raw. So all that is coming out now in the reaction to this thing. Now, the proof of the pudding will be in the eating or in the seeing, but a priori it's going to be... it's going to add a new dimension to the term gallows humour or graveside humour. I can't see it. I don't like it myself. Anyone wants to go and see it, they're welcome to. But I find it distasteful and I don't like the idea.
OK, Blind Boy, do you see this as a potential opportunity, as a kind of an opportunity for the Blackadder of the famine?
One thing I'd like to bring up as well, I'm surprised that other people haven't actually spotted it, but something that's considered to be one of the greatest pieces of comedic satire in the English language was written by an Irishman, Jonathan Swift, and he wrote it in 1729, which was 10 years before the first famine, not the big one.
I presume you're talking about The Modest Proposal.
The Modest Proposal. Jonathan Swift wrote a piece of satire called A Modest Proposal in 1729, and it's considered one of the greatest pieces of satire in the English language. And in this, what Swift basically proposes is that at the time in Ireland around 1729, it was 10 years before a famine, not the famine, not the one in 1840, but the economic policies of kind of not caring or not knowing about the poor, these existed, and these are the things that kind of led to the famine on behalf of by the British. But what Swift's Modest Proposal is about is that it's an ironic kind of parody of the careless policies that suggests that the poor Irish should sell their children for money so that the rich aristocracy can eat those children. And it's horrendous to nearly read because it's so shocking. It's like, is he genuinely suggesting that the rich should eat the children of the poor? But that was Swift's satirical way of making a very powerful point about failing economic policy in Ireland, and making a huge point about how the aristocracy didn't care about the people that were starving.
Final word on this one, Tim Pat.
A blind boy, and may I say, by the way, that for a blind boy, you're very perceptive. You can see things very clearly. The problem here is, going back to what I said, that we could be pleasantly surprised, and it could be like a Swiftian Modest Proposal in modern dress. But there is something curious about the fact that with all this going on, Channel 4 haven't come out of the trenches and said what it's likely to be. They haven't indicated, and they've just hunkered down. And we're left with this kind of bad taste in the mouth. This could be another stage Irish job, a bad taste in a historic thing. We don't know. If it's like, I take it your point is that we should wait and see and be delighted because it could turn out to be a Swiftian thing. I would hope it would, but there's no indication, and the people who could most tell us that, the writer and the studio who are commemorating it, and by the way, this could be just an urban myth or a rumour, but somebody here in television told me that producer or the people responsible for this idea once tried a similar thing with the Holocaust, of all places in Germany, and, quote, it didn't go down very well, unquote.
Yeah.
Right, OK. We're going to have to leave it there. By the way, Hugh Travers, who is the scriptwriter, wasn't available to join us this evening, but his comment is that comedy equals tragedy plus time.